fantasy. So you wanna be a champion?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of SuperCoach Tragics podcast. Once again, I'll be your host, Dan, coach of Badonkadonk. Hopefully this week my Wi-Fi holds up. As you're probably aware, last week I sounded like a drunk robot, which was only half true. Tonight I'm joined by three special guests. First off, we have Glen. Glen, mate, how was your week, mate? How you been?
Yeah, good, mate. It was good to see a bit of footy over the weekend gone, and I'm looking forward to the football coming up this weekend with the teams being a bit more true.
Yeah, mate, yeah, looking forward to that, actually. I've seen a few lineups come up already, and I'm looking forward to seeing those players, seeing what the minutes look like.
Yeah.
And next up, we have from SuperCoach 360, once again, Timmy O.
Evening, gents. How are you all doing?
Bloody good, mate, bloody good. See some footy back.
Looking forward to it.
That's it. And finally, making his Tragics debut, we have Ross Mann. Ross, welcome to the panel, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good. I've been watching the podcast and it's great to watch. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, anytime, mate. That leads into nicely to our shout-outs, guys. The three panelists you have on tonight. I've been doing a few articles for the SuperCoach 360 website, which is the supercoach360.com. So Glen, Timmy O, and Ross Mann have been putting articles up there, and Juzzy's been doing a lot of work behind the background getting that website up. So check it out if you haven't already. It's a great looking site. Next up, I'll also shout out because Brod isn't here tonight, I'll shout out the SuperCoach Tragics Cash Comps. Get in quick, guys. Jump onto the NRL SuperCoach Tragics Cash Comp page. We'll have a few head-to-head spots left, so please jump in quickly. After we've done all those, there will be only overalls left to go. And last but not least, I want to shout out the legends from SuperCoach Championship Rings. Please jump on their website, go to supercoachchampion.com. The legends over there have actually kindly, once again, for the third year in a row, donated us another SuperCoach ring. I'll get it up here for the guys watching at home. You can see the ring. I don't think you can. There we go. Right there in front of you there, SuperCoach ring. Which is greatly being donated once again, they've done it for the last 2 years, and this is the third year now. This one I just showed you was the one that I actually won first year. So, yeah, get in there, guys. The overall group code is 922904. So jump in, guys.
Well done, Dano.
All right. Okay, so first things first, there's been some news out there in the week, some relevant SuperCoach news. I'll pass it over to Glen, our man out in the field. Jump on, mate.
Out in the field, that's me. Yeah, so the news this week is, Triple M are reporting that Billy Walters is to start at 5'8" for the Broncos. Dragons Tyrell Fuimano is facing a 5-month ban after what he done to Dunster, and Dunster sadly is out for the season. Tohu Harris could return in 6 to 10 weeks, which is good news for Tohu, not so good for those of us looking at some of the players replacing. The Eels are looking at signing Jermaine Osako in 2022, and CNK has a positive COVID test. Latrell will be playing from round 2, and the final one was Parker and Tate are calling for the Cowboys to get rid of Lolo and Holmes and move them on. So I thought that was an interesting one. I don't know what others think about the $10 million man, but that's the news.
Oh, he's probably worth $10 million if they use him the bloody right way. He's get rid of him all you want, but I think there's more problems there than that. So it's a bit of a strange one for me. So, yeah. All right, guys. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the 5'8", halves, and fullbacks. So first up, we're going to start with the halfback position, guys. So I'm going to start off with the guns. First up, no surprises here, Nathan Cleary, priced at $949,000. Last year, he averaged 108 points per game, which is just crazy, which is 30 points above the next. There is obviously a few doubts there about his injury and whether he will start round one. So I can definitely see the hesitance in getting him in there. But by far, he's the guy you're going to have in your team by the end of the year at least. Next up, guys, if you want to go the next step down, my suggestion would be DCE. He's priced at $695,000 and averaged 30 points below him at 79 points per game. Issues there, I find he's a bit of a roller coaster, but when he goes on that run, he's bloody terrifying. I think he went on a great run at the end of last year, and I think he played a pivotal role in Timmy winning overall last year. So I think if you got to get on at the right time, I think, and follow that run. And finally, guys, we've got Jerome Hughes, $640,000. This is the guy that I'm leaning more towards personally. $640,000, average 73 points per game. The only thing I can really think as a negative with him would be the weaker pack at the start of the season. As you know, Melbourne have a bit of the first game, they're going to have a few players out. But in all fairness, he's still going to be driving that team around for round one. So I'm pretty confident he's the guy I'm going to go with, unless I can get some good pods in there. Maybe that's where I might get me pods. So next up, we're going to talk about the value plays. Glen, you've got some really good value players in the halfback there, mate.
Yeah, I have. I had a bit of a look around. So one that'll probably make people prick up and think, what is he talking about, is Mitchell Moses. And I know that people, Gutho tends to steal a lot of points off Moses, but he's priced at $550K. He averaged 58.3 last year. His draw is quite pretty, I think, with the Titans, Sharks, Storm, Dragons, Titans, Tigers, Knights, Cows. So out of that, really only is the Sharks and Storm that I see as hard games. And then the other 6 are quite easy games. 6 to first, really nice inside. I rate him. I actually rate their Parramatta side this year. I think they're one of the top 6. So that would be my first guys, would be Mitchell Moses. The second one I looked at, and I personally don't like, but he's got such a high ownership that I feel I should mention him, is Shaun Johnson. He's at $462K, average 52.7. I actually went through his numbers of last year and I was actually staggered because Shaun Johnson, prior to last year or the year before, was a staple in my side quite often. He has that upside, and in a Warriors side that has quite an easy draw as well with the Dragons, Titans, Tigers, Broncos and Cows. But I'm just going to throw up some of the numbers that he got last year. He got a 59, a 28, 79, 59, 75, 51, 17 and 61. He only played 10 games, and that's the risk you get with Shaun Johnson. He's had a knee injury and a groin injury forever, and I cannot tell you how many times the guy's pulled out just before the game's about to start, which as a Supercoach owner I can tell you is very frustrating. But a lot of coaches out there better than me think that he's the play. So and the upside to him also, he's available at halfback and 5'8". So, so that's interesting. I've got 2 more that I'll mention. I got 1 more, which is Toby Sexton, which is $434,900. He averaged 62 from 4 games last season. His draw is Eels, Warriors, Raiders, Tigers, Eels, Manly, which is kind of a tough match to me. Eels, Raiders, Eels, Manly, out of those 6. So they're pretty good defensive sides. But Sexton does have a very Supercoach-friendly game in a Titan side that we see points in. They've got strike all over the park. So he could be a decent shout out. So they're the ones that I've picked out that are value picks, mate, in the halfback spot.
Yeah, I think I think you mentioned previously before the podcast about which side Moses or which side Dylan Brown's going to be on, and if Moses ends up being on that right side, he actually might get a few more points as opposed to being on the left side where Gutho steals his points. So definitely one to watch, and the fact that no one's looking at him really brings him to that pod level as well, which is great.
Just on that, I agree with that, everything you've said. As we were talking about earlier, if he plays on that left side, Gutherson steals a lot of those points. They play a sweep play where, so when he was on the left, he'd pass to Gutho. Gutho would run up, either put the little kick in through and get it that way, or he'd pass it straight out to his winger and cut out the centre and get the try assist, line break assist. He is a goal kicking half, which means that he can get those points in a side that I do see points in. But yeah, he really needs to play right side. And if he does, I'd even marry him up with someone like a Maddo. I think that's a nice little combination for those looking for the combos.
Yeah, well, I've got Maddo on my team now, so if I'm back in Maddo win, I should probably have a look at Moses too. So, alrighty, thanks, Glenn. Moving on, we're going to look at some cheapy halves. So, Ross, you have some cheapy halves, mate. We should look out for.
Yep. So the first one obviously is Lachlan Ilius. So he's available at halfback, all 5'8". Priced at 205,200. He only averaged 39 last year, but he only played one game. I think he'll have a good year this year. I think he'll be pretty set. He should play in the halves pretty much all season, unless he does a flop or something and they bring Taff or something in. But I think he's pretty safe there, and he's currently at 51% ownership, and I'm pretty sure by the start of the season it'll be higher than that. And he's definitely going to be in my team for sure. The next one I was going to talk about was Tata Moan, who's available at 5'8" or CTW. He's 284,500. He averaged 20 in last year. He averaged 32.5. He played 11 games, and 6 of them were 80 minutes or more. And his ownership is currently at 31%. I think he's also a lock too if he gets that starting spot in the halves for the Dragons.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think watching him moan as well in the trial is actually looking really good. So he's in my centre wing at the moment. So I'm looking forward to watching him play this week as well. All right, now off to my favourite. We're looking at some pods in the halves. This is where I'm actually looking to pod up in this position, I'm thinking. So I'm listening. I'm all ears, Timmy.
Awesome, boys. Look, I've got 2 halfbacks that I'm looking at the moment. We've got Sam Walker from the Roosters. He's at 545,900, currently at 4% ownership, which is pretty amazing for the points that he pushed up in some games through last season. So throughout the season last year, he scored 1,183 points. That gave him a 62 average, 72 minutes per game, so he didn't play every minute of every game, for 80.86 points per minute. That was across a 19-game sample size. His first 8 games, he's got the Knights, Manly, Souths, North Queensland Cowboys, Broncos, Warriors, St George, and the Dogs. I don't know about you boys, but I reckon that's a pretty juicy start for the season. I'm going to throw it out there now and say that I reckon Roosters will be top of the table and close to undefeated after those first 8 games. If they're undefeated and playing as well as I think they will be, I think Sam Walker is a shoo-in.
Yeah, especially if Momo, if for whatever reason it doesn't get that spot, Sam Walker's kicking too. So something to look out for.
Yeah,
definitely have that upside, especially if Cleary misses those first couple of games too. It could be a real good pod.
The second player I've got is Ben Hunt. He's 590,300. Currently only 1% ownership, which again, for somebody who's had the ceiling at stages throughout last season, I know he had his games where he didn't play 80 minutes and he obviously had his injury-affected season as well. But for somebody with his ability to be only at 1% and at 590K, it's not a bad deal. So he played last season. He got 1,010 points in total. That gave him a 67 average. That was just under 80 minutes per game, 0.84 points per minute, and that was with a 15-game sample size. So he played a few games in there for his 15. He's got the Warriors, Panthers, Sharks, Eels, and then Souths, Knights, Roosters, Tigers. So a bit of a mixed bag there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Ben Hunt goes. But at 1% ownership, yeah, not a bad shout if you're looking for a pod.
Yeah, I like his ceiling a lot. He has that really high ceiling. So, yeah, I got him in a couple of drafts actually. So hoping he shows me that ceiling a bit early on, which unlikely at the first few games. There's a pretty rough start, but then he opens up a little bit. So,
on a draft side too, he has a really good floor.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, one thing I'll mention now is when I look for a pod myself personally is I always ask myself 2 questions. The first one is, do they have a ceiling? Yeah, if they haven't got a ceiling, instantly move on to the next idea. And the next question I'll ask is, why are they a pod? So you got to think they could be a pod because they're expensive, and that's my favourite kind of pod because price being the only issue, then no one's going to own them, and they want to own them. So that's the questions I ask. The other one could be job security, and that's where you cross the line out of there. So you always ask those two questions, and that's why I normally get, if I do 1 or 2 pods a year, I normally get the right ones because I have to get through that little vigorous questionnaire I have to put through. So, do you have any more there, Timbo?
No, mate, that's all I've got down. Just those 2 main ones for the moment.
Fantastic. Well, we'll move on to the 5.
We've left one out, mate. I just want to mention Fogarty quickly for anyone. I think that behind that Raiders pack, he could be a good shout this year as a pod as well.
Yeah, it all depends on how our Raiders gel this year, I believe. I think if they start moving in the right direction, which they haven't really shown us the last 2 years, then maybe he's a go. But yeah, we'll need to have a wait and see on him. That's my personal opinion anyway. So, but we know he's got a very good Supercoach friendly game when he's on. So let's hope, we'll keep an eye on him as well. All right, so we'll move on to the 5/8s now. So I'll start with the guns. I'm going to rank these guys 1 and 2, and I'm very, very close to tying with them, but I'm going to put Munster up top based on a couple of things. So Munster's at 649, averaged 74 points last year, which if you ask any super coach that watches avidly, they would say that he had a pretty poor season last year by his standards, and still averaging 74 off the drinks, looking like he's fit and ready to go. I just can't see that going down. So I'll even put him as a value pick. I think there's a chance that he actually goes a lot better. Obviously, the downside being he's going to miss game 1. There's always the option there of maybe putting a Hastings on the field and getting him in, but that's still quite a lot of money you're putting in the 5/8 position there. Next up, this guy here is just a freak. Cody Walker, the last 2 years or even 3 years, he's been a bit of a freak. He was a pivotal role in my great season in 2020 where I came 15th. The only issue I can really see with him, so he's 734 and averaged 83 points last year. The only issue I can see there really with him is new halves pairing, which I'm kind of leaning towards actually not being a massive issue because all the press is telling me that Ilius is like a mini A-Ray clone. So it actually might take a few games to get going, but if this is true, then it might not take as long to gel as what you all once expect from a team. So they're the 2 I had there. So I'll move on to the value picks, Glen. How'd you go on the 5/8, mate?
Yeah, okay. So I picked a couple out. So one I went for was Jerome Luwak. I went for Luwak because he's in a ceiling club. I think the Panthers, we all know, can put on points. And so for that reason alone, at 515K with an average of 58.8, I don't think it's a bad shout. People are trying to save money in the halves. That's not a terrible price point to start at. The other one I went for, and this is, again, going along with Moses' pick, is Dylan Brown. For super coaches who have played for a while, I know he's got a really good base. I again would look at him more as a draft player, but I'd keep an eye on what side of the field he plays again. And again, behind that pack, I don't think Dylan Brown's a bad shout. The other one I really liked up until about half an hour ago, until I really thought about it and we had that conversation, was Kurt Mann. I like the fact that Kurt Mann playing at lock in a 5/8 position at 383K. He averaged 76 minutes last year with an average of 43.7, but most of them games were played either at 6 or 3, not in the middle. The ones that he played at 6, his scoring was a lot better, which says to me that he's I watched him the other night fold a couple of forwards and I thought he was really good. The fear factor for me is Barnett. We saw how they did it with Watson and Barnett last year, rotating them around. So he would only be valid for me, Kurt Mann, was if he was playing 55 or 60 minutes in that lock position. But at least it's worth a shout for those trying to save money in the 5/8 position. The only other one that I had, which is a fairly popular pick, which is Jackson Hastings. He's 350K. We don't really have an average for him because he's been over in the Super League. For those who watch the Super League, he was carving it up. But, so do most players that go from Australia to England. Their defence is not so good. I think you'll find the defences over here a lot more harder to work, and he's in a side that just can't score points. And I'm a Tigers fan. I'm telling you, he will get the goal kicking, apparently. So there's one plus. But, we're trying to fill spots in with guns in other areas. So that's one area we're trying to save money for mine. It's the 5/8 spot. So Jackson Hastings, I think, from those is the pick for me.
Yeah, I like Hastings at the moment because there was a very small sample size when he was playing for the Roosters, and he was playing at terrible. This is when the Roosters were terrible, and he had a pretty good average, only playing a few minutes per game. But his points per minute, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was actually quite high. So yeah, I reckon the only fear I have there with him is when I know it's going to be probably round 8, but when Dewey gets back, does Dewey go to the centres or does Dewey take his spot? So he's got 8 rounds to really prove himself in that spot, so he actually might be a pretty good call out.
I'll just add one more thing too, Dan. One of the reasons that I like, Ross mentioned Moan earlier on at 5'8" and centre wing. Kurt Mann's also available at centre wing and 5'8". So for those that like to mix and match, which is something I do, I actually have Kurt Mann at 5'8" at the moment, and I have Amoni at centre wing. I don't think it's going to stay that way, but I did that because I like the versatility of moving them around. So that's just another added plus.
Yeah, I think I did that at one point last week when I was mucking around my team. I saw that interchangeable would be pretty handy. There's actually one thing. I got a stat here on Jerome Luwak, so I really like Jerome Luwak actually this year. So I got a stat, more of an NRL stat. But last year, try assist for Panthers, Cleary got 21, Luwak got 19, and 13 went to Burton. So I don't see Crichton next to him giving those try assists away like Burton was. So I feel like they might be, even if he doesn't get the full 13, if there's still the same amount of points in Penrith this year as there was last year, might be a few more try assists going Luai's way. So that's why I loved how you put him in the value spot, because I believe he's underpriced for what he can perform.
Okay.
Awesome. So next up, we've got Ross with some cheapies in the 5'8", mate. What do you got?
So I've only got the one because obviously I already touched on a couple earlier in the halves. So the one I have is Ezra Mann. Now, obviously, this one is a bit of an unknown because obviously it all sounds like Billy Walters is going to get the starting spot in the halves for the Broncos, but I get a feeling he's going to get an opportunity at some stage. And if Reynolds is out the first round, possibly, there's a chance that he could slot in for the first game. Now, he didn't play any games last year in first grade, and he's 175,400, so he's at the basement price, and he's currently sitting at 31% ownership as well. I just thought it'd be worth throwing him out there because I think at some stage he may get an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I really love watching him in the trials. I think he's definitely worth an idea. And like, I'm not sure if this year's the year to do it, but I often would start with a pod that I think is going to have a crack later on in the year. And I think it's most definitely going to be him. But I'm just not sure on whether I'm going to do that enough at the start of the year this year with all the COVID protocols and everything. So,
can I ask you a question, Dan? Because we've left one out. So maybe I thought, what's the panel's decision on Walters? Anyone think he's worth starting? My fear, as we talked about earlier, was the way they've got 4 5'8" there that could switch in and out at any time. And we know Walters likes to switch. So, but is anyone thinking that they could start Walters in that position?
Well, personally, I'm a bit, I'm sure everyone is as well, a bit scared of how Kevy's going to rotate the halves. I think we mentioned earlier that we don't see it actually happening, but there's nothing telling us that's going to happen. Like going off the past, we look at last year and what he did. So that's all. I just base everything off what I already know. I'm not going to try and base my my SuperCoach team on what I think may happen. Otherwise, I'll be ranked a lot worse than what I normally am. So, any other guys? Ross? Oh, sorry, Tim?
Yeah, boys, I'm a Broncos fan and a Broncos member. As we were saying before we came on the pod, I think this year the only spot that they're concerned about is in the halves there. So obviously they've got Reynolds, so they're looking for a partner for him. If the rest of the team's sorted, I can't see them swapping and changing. I think they'll give it, even give him till, if they pick Walters or whoever they pick, I think it's their spot till Origin or till mid-season. And then if something's not working, then they'll make a change after that. I can't see it being what they did last season, where Gamble will play for 2 games and then they'll bring Albert Kelly in for 2 games and then they'll try somebody else for a couple of games. I can't see that happening this year. I think there's too much pressure on the Broncos now that he's got essentially the team that he wanted, or he bought enough players, he's got the leadership, he's got all the things that they talked about last season. So they're sort of running out of excuses now. I think there's a fair amount of have to stick and pick and stick, and that's how it's going to be. So I think they give him a fairly solid sample of games to play and wait and see if it's not working, then they might tweak it. But I honestly think whoever they pick, it's their spot to lose.
I'd love to have your optimism, mate. I would love it, but I have the fear factor in me from that anyway. So, I'm a bit nervous about that. So, if it happens, then great, because I have a soft spot for the Broncos. They're my second favourite team. So, but for your sake, mate, I hope you're right, but I don't see it happening. So.
We're on the up and up. It's going to be a much better year this year. You watch.
Oh, it'll be a better year, yeah. But as long as ARA doesn't do a hammy or something, and then you guys are back with the old halves you had last year. So
that's it.
Sorry, I just put the mocker on you. Sorry, guys. All right, so on to the 5'8" pods. Who'd you find there, Tim?
Yeah, mate, so the two main ones that I've looked at that we haven't spoken about already is Matt Burton. He's obviously switched clubs now, so there's a few things there that we're not really quite sure how he's going to go. He obviously played centres for most of last season for the Panthers, played some games in the halves during Origin and whatnot when the other halves weren't available. But essentially, Matt Burton, he's at 576,300, 576,300, currently at 11% ownership, which actually surprises me. I'm surprised that he's that high. I would have thought he'd be a little bit less than that. So people are obviously looking at his total point score from last season and playing on that, but obviously very different position, very different club to where he's playing now. So last year he scored 1,446 points. That was for a 66 average, and that was with 80 minutes per game across the season on average. 0.82 points per minute and across a 22-game sample size. His draw for the first 8 weeks is Cowboys, Broncos, Manly, Storm, Panthers, Souths, Broncos and Roosters for the Dogs. So, yeah, that's their first 8 rounds. Me personally, I'd be giving him a wide berth, but that's only me personally. I don't see the value in him. I think his position is too much conjecture over how he's going to go in that position. He's obviously got to take control of that team now, and it's yet to be seen whether he's actually really got that in him. My other one I'm looking at was AJ Brimson, just as a bit of a left field, currently at 2% ownership, 533,800. Scored 1,096 points last season for a 61 average. That was with 78 minutes per game across the season at a 0.78 points per minute. That was with 18 games sample size throughout the season. The Titans have got the Eels, Warriors, Canberra, Tigers, Eels again, Manly, North Queensland, Panthers. So bit of a mixed bag again. Obviously the Eels twice and Panthers in that 8th round. AJ Brimson again, I guess he's a wide berth for me. He's a no. I'm either going to look at a gun or probably 2 cheapies in the 5'8".
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Like I said before, with those 2 questions that you ask why are they pods, and those guys have so many question marks about their reason why they're pods. So, like Burton, he scored 66 points last year in a massive upside team, and now he's going to a team with too many question marks. I just can't see him matching that. I reckon he might drop down nice and juicy later on in the year. And I don't want to get started on AJ because last year when I come off a great win in 2020, I started last year thinking, how good am I? I'm going to outsmart everyone, and I'm going to start with AJ as my pod. And it was a terrible call. And I sold him and he went nuts. So, yeah, I love him as a player, but he can drop it. So, okay.
Did anybody warn you about that, Dan? I'm sure I heard someone warning you.
I heard some buzzing in the background, but yeah.
Boys, can I just say, I know we spoke about Luai briefly before, but at 515K, he's currently only 7% ownership. Now, I know we also looked at Cody Walker earlier. Me personally, I had a pretty decent season last year and basically had Luai and Cody Walker in from go to woe. I actually didn't have Munster in my side for 1 game last season at all. So I think if you can balance out your team, I much rather prefer Walker and Luai. But again, I think I'm going to be going for, if I don't go 2 cheapies, it'll be 1 gun and 1 cheapie.
Yeah, I really, really like Luwak. I got a soft spot for him as a Panthers fan, but I just see so much upside versus last year coming that way. I think he's going to be, and like everything's pointing towards it with like last year he started off so strong as well. He has that real strong start. So, but I have heard, I was listening to another podcast last week, and his average with Cleary there is much higher than when Cleary is not there. So if Cleary does not start round one, he might actually be a bit of a trap at the start of that first couple of games if he's out for a few games. So just keep an eye on that too, guys. All right, so moving on to the fullbacks. I'm going to start with the guns. There's only 3 I've got here. There's actually a few more guns, but I think they more lean into the pod territory there. So where we go? Sorry, guys. Bear with me. So start off, I've got... I can't even find my paperwork here. Here we go. So I've got obviously Turbo, number 1. He's the guy that everyone's going to aspire to. Priced at a whopping 1.2, as everyone knows. Averaged 143 points a game last season. Can he keep it up? I'd love to say no, frankly, but he's a freak. We saw at the trials, he just touches the ball and then magic happens. It's just, yeah. So I'd love to say no. I believe it might drop down, but I'm not even hopeful that'll happen. I think he's just he's a 200-point game waiting to happen every single week. Doesn't matter who he's playing against. So next down, we've got Cadesco at 760,000. I believe there's some good value here. He's actually priced at 86 from last year. And my only concern with him is if Cleary, there's a word about Cleary being injured. And the reason why Teddy is not as cheap, but as low priced as he is because he had to manage the whole team last year and didn't get a chance to do Teddy things. He didn't get a chance to do that sweeping run all the time. I think he grabbed the ball and try to make everything happen from scratch. And he did a great job. Still averaged 86 points a game, but that's nothing to what he can do. So if Cleary is injured, I'm actually looking at potentially looking elsewhere at this stage, just because I don't want to risk having those low points. In saying that, they are playing the Knights' first game as well, so he could do anything with them. And finally, guys, this is the no-brainer for me, is Papanhausen. Price at 694, reduced minutes last year. He averaged 111 in the 80-minute games he did play. So if he's back to 180 minutes, if he's back to 80 minutes a game this year and he stays healthy, he'll be in my team for the rest of the year. One of my strategies this year was going to be playing, and from quite early on, he's going to be playing fullback roulette. I will be probably keeping Puppy in there. I believe he's the one that I'll keep, and then I'll be going from Teddy to Turbo and Teddy to Latrell and going back and forth on matchups. With those extra 5 trades, I'm actually going to utilise that strategy. Hopefully it works out for me this year. And that's the guns there, guys. So with the value, how'd you go there, Glen?
Yeah, so I picked out 5. There's 2 that I'll spend a bit of time talking on. I'll mention the first 2 quickly. So Jaden Campbell at 502 with an average of 63.7. He is quite a dynamic little player. The downside for him is the side obviously he plays in. That's the negative for me. I mean, you talked about you had a checklist. For me, it's ticks and ticks and ticks in ceiling sides, then ceiling player, different things like that. He's not in the ceiling club, so that's the downside to him. The next one I have is Jermaine Osako. With the injury to Tessie New, I don't know if it's going to be Osako or if it's going to be Cobbo, but I see a lot of points in this Broncos side. I really do. I think that both sides are really nicely stacked. I really like the pack that they've got this year, and I really like the buys that they've brought in. So Osako's at 494. He had an average of 56.4. And with A-Ray news today of there being a possible hammy news, he could possibly goal kick or stag. So just keep that in mind. But the one that I really wanted to talk about, which is everyone's talking about, is Tyrell Sloan. I mean, how good is this kid? The negative, he plays for the Dragons. And the Dragons just, cannot score points. They spend more time defending. But this kid is a genuine gun, in my opinion. At 447K, he averages 63.8 from 5 matches in an average of 80 minutes. He's I won't go through all his scores, but he got 91 versus the Cows, 95 versus Souths. And I just think he's a genuine option, and he's also available at centre wing. Is that right?
Yeah.
He's also available at centre wing. So what a beautiful option. If you was to start, if you're looking to save money and you might want to buy a Turbo, and you can't quite get to the Papanhausen and Teddy as your secondary, Sloan could be a really good option. Fatten up another player, bring him up into your centre wing, and then you can buy that second gun in Teddy or Papanhausen later down the track. So I think he's a genuine option for those out there with a bit of strap. Yes, Tim?
Mate, just interested to know if you've got the stat there. Do you know what his ownership is currently?
I've got every stat there, but his buddy ownership. I've literally written down what he scored, how he scored, 20.4 in tries, 4.5 in tackles, 8.6 in tackles, offloads. Yeah, I trust you. I know. That's the next guy.
It's all good. I'll find it and I'll let the crew know.
That would be good because, I think it's one that the punters will want to know. So while you're doing that, I'll get on to my next two. So the next one is Charles Nicholl Clockstead, who I genuinely think is a really good footballer. I owned him in SuperCoach the year before last, the year he came over from the Warriors to the Raiders. And, mate, this kid is in everything. He's a hard worker. The only nemesis to this kid, in my opinion, is Brandon Savage. If Savage takes that spot off him and he moves into the centre wing, that would be horrible. But if he gets the centre wing position and at some side lands back at fullback, you can have him in that dual position, which he isn't at the moment. But again, if you're looking to start Turbo and you want a second fullback and can't afford a Teddy or a Turbo or a Papanhausen, I think C&K is a genuine good choice as that second. He just has really good floor. The kid always delivers. Doesn't quite have the ceiling of the other three. And the last one I want to talk about is the Hammer. Hamiso Fedo, a.k.a. the Hammer. Look, he's 418K. He's dual centre wing fullback, which makes him pretty to be able to buy as a centre playing fullback. He averaged 47 last year, 0.8 from 13 games. He had 10 games at 80, 98 being his highest score. But if you look at his base, and I haven't written it down, but I remember a couple of them, it was 40, 29, 28. His bases were fairly high in some of those games. Just back to you, Timmy. So did you get the percentage on Sloan, mate?
Yeah, mate. So Sloan, 447K, 500, currently 11% owned.
11%, yeah. So that's pretty. All right, that's all I have for you there, Dano. Back to you, mate.
Cheers, mate. No, yeah, with the Hammer, I really like. I like to be able to watch a footy game and have a guy in my team that has that X factor, and he's just good to watch, isn't he? I don't think I'm going to go there, but I just love those guys to watch that have the X factor. And when he's on fire, it's like it's like watching say like a Greg Inglis run through the line, and you always have that guy. And you get so excited watching it, and that's what you look forward to. But I don't think I can do it. I think that position there is a bit of a hit and miss when it comes to pods and value at the moment, unless you're going for a Turbo, sorry. All right, so into the cheapies. Ross, how'd you go with cheapies and fullback, mate?
Yeah, all right, so I've got a few here. I've got three. There's three main ones that I'm going to go over, and there's a couple others that I'm just going to throw in there that I think are general decent options, hopefully. So the first one's obviously Joseph Sawali. So available at CTW or fullback. He's priced at around about 259K. He averaged 37 last year, only played 5 games. His current ownership is 52%. I have him in my team at the moment. My concerns with him is playing on the wing. I think he's more of a centre than a winger. And I think with so many options floating around like Nguama and Momorowski, that there's a good chance that he may not even get picked for the first game. And even if he does, if he doesn't perform, then he could see himself in and out of the team. So he's the first one. The next one is Xavier Savage. I watched that trial game on the weekend, and he was really, really good for Canberra. He played fullback, and he just absolutely carved them up. And yeah, he's certainly going to give C&K a run for his money for that fullback position if he plays the way he does. So he should start on the wing. He's only available at fullback, however, though. But if he does play, obviously, in the wing, then after they do their revaluation of the SuperCoach positions, he will become a dual. So his price is 286,400. He averaged 46.7 last year, and only played 3 games, and his current ownership is 12%. The other one I wanted to speak about was Sylvan Cobbo, who's, from what we've been told, is going to play the fullback for the trial game this weekend. So he's currently available at fullback and CTW at 320,100. He averaged 40.6 last year in the 7 games he played, and he's currently 56% owned. The other two that I just wanted to mention too is Sean Russell from Para if he gets that starting spot from Dunster. He's at 285k. And the other one I wanted to throw in there that I think could be a decent pot option too is Rocco Berry from the Warriors too at 322,000. He's available at fullback and CTW as well. He's currently ownership at 2%.
Mm-hmm. Glen?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say something. So for those of you that are watching this pod that are new to Supercoach, we talk about ceiling clubs, we talk about ceiling players. Fullback is a ceiling position. So in Supercoach, that's where every round you'll see your biggest points come from. So one of the reasons that people stack with the Turbos, the Teddys and the Papanhausens is because those positions are really vital to your point scoring in Supercoach. And I just wanted to touch on Sawali. So for those that follow our page, I wrote a post yesterday and today called Prime Real Estate. And Sawali, if he lands that right wing spot, which I think would be Kevin Nkwama, but if he gets it, we look at how Morris went there. That is one of the spots that I think is a prime position on the field. So I think Sawali is a great shout, Ross.
Yeah, I do agree that Sawali is a genuine centre, but I think the try scoring ability on that side, especially that Sam Walker side too.
Yep.
Yeah, so Sam Walker with that long cutout pass, I reckon he could be could be a few points there. So I just don't see anyone unless you're going turbo. I don't see anyone putting him in the fullback position. But it could be still an option to do that. Like you said, fatten up one of your centre wings and bring him up there and actually bring Teddy in later or something. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to rotate some pods and everything in the fullback. So Timmy I'm listening, mate. What do you got?
Righto, boys. Number one, first cab off the rank, I'm looking at Latrell Mitchell. Currently, so he's obviously, first thing I will say is he's suspended for round one. Now, he was going to be suspended for round two as well, but the NRL judiciary finally switched on and decided to make the All-Stars game count. This was a bit of a contentious issue online today with all the podmasters. So I had my 2 cents worth on that, but I won't go into it now. So, 721,000. He's suspended for round one, currently only at 1% ownership. Now, that's obviously because you'd like to think because he was suspended for the first 2 games. I think that that's going to come in a little bit now that he's only suspended for round one. If people are looking at having Harry Grant at the start, having Cleary at the start, having Papanhausen at the start and sitting him out for a week, then there's no reason why you wouldn't do it for Latrell as well. I know just from talking to some of the other guys from 360, we some of the boys are talking about doing that with Latrell, with Supercoach 360 boys. So, he 1,398 points last season, gave him an 82 average and 78 minutes per game. So that gave him a 1.05 point per minute, and that was over 17 games. So Latrell's draw is Broncos, Melbourne, Roosters, Panthers, Dragons, Dogs, Titans, Manly. So, including the Broncos, the first 4 games are going to be really tough. And then after that, it gets a little bit easier with Dragons, Dogs, Tigers, and Manly. Next one I've got is Calen Ponga, currently only at 8%, 599,900. He scored 958 points last season for a 68 average. He, throughout the season, went 73 minutes per game on average for a 0.94 ppm. That was across 14 games. Ponga's draw, Roosters, Tigers, Panthers, Sharks, then Manly, Dragons, Eels, and Storm. And like I said, currently at 8% for just under 600k. Last one I've got, which I think is pretty interesting, is actually Gutho. Gutho's at 2%. So Gutho from the Eels, 655,300. Scored pretty well last season, 1,719. Gave him a 75 average with 79 minutes per game at a 0.95 points per minute. That was for 23 games, so he basically played the whole season or pretty close to it. The Eels do have a really tasty draw, and this is why I like Gutho. He's got Titans, Sharks, Storm, St. George, Titans, Tigers, Knights, and Cows. So you could argue that apart from the Storm, he's in certainly in the other 7 games. So I think with Gutho's draw, we talked about his sweep play earlier that he likes to play with Moses. Seems to get a lot more points from that. If I don't go with Teddy or Turbo or Paps, if I'm going to fall short on one of them, I'm seriously looking at Gutho with that first 8-game draw that he's got.
I just want to mention one more thing. I'm sorry, but we talk about different strategies that people adopt. If Savage was to start, I would very seriously consider starting him as my second fullback, bringing in a Brian Toho into my centre wing, so that way that I've still got that upside, but I'm getting a player that we know who can score really well, almost like a forward and almost like a fullback. So, I mean, it's just if people out there are looking for different strategies, don't rule that out if you want to go a cheap fullback and bring in someone like a Garrick or a Toho.
Oh, I really like.
Sorry, mate. I've written that down, Glenn, I figured somebody was going to mention it, and if not, I would. I can see that as being a strategy as well. And I saw a couple of teams this week where they did have Savage and Turbo. So to sort of counteract the extra coin from Turbo, they put Savage in there. Because he's fullback only, C&K is assumed at this stage, although Savage over the last week seemed to play a bit better than C&K, arguably. So if Savage starts on the wing after round 6, then they'll actually give him dual position from fullback to centre wing as well. So at which point, as a bit of a strategy, you might start him at fullback, get Turbo in, save some money elsewhere, or get in extra guns elsewhere. Obviously, if he's on the wing, then after round 6, he gets centre wing as well, and you move him up and then bring back in Latrell or bring back in Paps or somebody that you didn't start with for those first 5 weeks.
Yeah, actually, I haven't really thought of that strategy. Like, I looked at, when I see the new rules, I always try to find how the rules work, and then I try to find a way to manipulate those rules to suit me. And that was one thing I actually didn't think of, and that's a bloody good idea. I love the idea of being able to, because 2 fullbacks you think you need to have, but you don't need to have them. You can have 2 fullback scores in your team that you wouldn't normally have, and that's 2 pods you're going to have, which is brilliant. I like the idea.
And the good thing is, if he continues to kill it, you can move him up to the CTW and keep him as a keeper up there, and bring in another gun fullback as well. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
And as we all know, one of the main objectives of SuperCoach early is revenue. I mean, who better than if Savage starts on that right as your second fullback option? It enables you to get, say, you want to go Turbo, or if you go to Cadesco Papanhausen, it allows you a Toho and a Garrick. And I mean, you know, explore with your sides. I mean, I suggest to everybody out there, look at multiple ways to mess around with your sides. Say, oh, look, rob Peter to pay Paul, and just see which one of them works out the best for you. Because, you know, the guy that wins SuperCoach won't do what we're all doing. It's every year. They just do that little thing different. You know, I look at the guy that's won at last year's side, and his season was so similar to mine. It was just a couple of little things, DCE, kick out, those little ones that I didn't do, you know. And so mess around with them, guys. Have a go.
Can I just say really quickly, I don't know if you mentioned this before, I think it was Ross Ross was looking at the cheapies. So Savage's draw, Sharks, Cowboys, Titans, Manly. Then he's got the Storm, Cowboys round 6, Panthers 7, and Warriors in round 8. So a bit of a mixed bag. Really only the 2 tough teams. Like we said, I think the Raiders are going to have some points in them. So I think he could get off to a pretty good start.
And as Ross pointed out, you can move him up into the centre wing area when he gets that dual status swap. So,
yeah, no, I agree. And especially if he's in the centre wing area, you definitely can just do what you normally do with centre wings and just play him on matchups. If you're playing the Storm, you put him on the bench. Yeah, It's harder to do with fullback. So,
absolutely.
All right, guys. Last week I did forget to make a few shout outs, so I'm going to ask if I've forgotten anyone this time, guys.
Let's give Kano a shout out, guys. Look, he runs the Turbo Hammy Cup and he does a lot of work. He's bringing all the podmasters together at the moment, and he's making an absolutely great community. For all of us that have played SuperCoach for years, we've all known each other for years by name. Some of us talk, some of us haven't. Kano's brought all that together into one beautiful competition. And so I think, you know, if you go to Discord, if you're into, you know, what Discord is, look for Kano Turbo Hammy's Cup and check on the SuperCoach Tragics page. We post everyone's pods. We endorse community. That's what we're about in Tragic. So go on our page, check out everyone's pods, get everyone's perspectives, and good luck to you this year.
Timmy.
Can I just throw out there really quick then while we're talking about that? The just trying to find the magic number. Podmasters seated. Nope, we want the Podmasters. Have one of you guys got the Podmasters overall number there?
I don't. I had it written down. I apologise to you, Kano. We'll make sure that that's one that we have written down in future. In fact, we'll on our page. So if you want to go and look on our page, I'll make sure we post it. Kana's created one that covers every single podcaster's overall groups. So we'll put that up on our page straight after this pod and make sure that everyone can find it.
Yeah, that's very true, guys. So Kane actually posted in the page the NRL SC Podmasters Cup. He actually posted on there a list of all the podcast leagues that are out there, and also the prizes that are available, guys. So if you want to jump into all those leagues, the code's up there. There'll be the way eligibility as well. So you might have to listen to their podcast and like one of their podcasts, or you'll see the prizes that are available too. Some of the prizes actually involve cash as well as the SuperCoach Championship ring. So jump on there, jump into all those groups if you have room. And before we go as well, I want to just give everyone a tip. Something that I did that actually really helped me in my only good year was I listened to every single possible podcast out there. So I went on to every platform. I went into iTunes, I went into Spotify, I went into YouTube, and I just searched NRL SuperCoach, and I subscribed, followed, liked every single one so I get all the notifications when they arrive. And for a living, I drive a lot for a living, so I'll sit there in my car and listen to all these podcasts, and it's really good to get all these different perspectives, and eventually you start to feel like you're an expert because you've listened to the experts, and it's just and then you start making your own mind up with the information that they give you. So yeah, feel free to jump on that, do that, guys. Support our podcasters out there, and definitely check them out.
Just one more too. I'll add also, if you want to get into draft, Rick from the Dynasty, Fig Jam Dynasty, and also the All Stars podcast I found really good. And of course, I want to give a shout out to Wilfred to the Champions podcast. You know, he does a lot for the community. He's been a former winner, and just shout out to all them pods. If I've forgotten any guys, look, they'll be on our page. So check them all out. They're awesome, really good content out there.
Cool. That about wraps everything up for this week, guys. This will be up on the Facebook page very shortly, and we'll also chuck it on YouTube very shortly. And if you don't want to see our ugly faces, feel free to jump on Spotify and find us there. Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys.
Thanks for having us, boys. Stay safe and be good.